play down the black continent. Because at this point in time, development communication should be at the forefront. We should begin to hear what is done in Nigeria, what is happening in Nigeria, not what was not done. You know, yes, you can draw attention to what was not done with the hope that that will make it to be done, but you also need to bring about what is done, to project what is done. That is balance and objectivity. And that's why this year, the Congress itself has introduced a new dimension, which I believe is going to really bring a very great advantage to Nigeria. There is going to be conversation with the government of Nigeria after the opening ceremony. And that conversation is going to have key Nigerian ministers telling the international media what activities have taken place in the sectors that they represent. That will make the international journalists know what is happening in Nigeria. They need to know what is happening in Nigeria, so they can be dissuaded from thinking that it's either nothing happens here or whatever happens here is negative. And then we also need to let our leaders begin to have confidence in the local media. You talked about investment in BBC that is making people want to go and talk to BBC. It's not only investments. Our leaders are exogenous. By that I mean they are interested in foreign things. If a Nigerian journalist wants to speak to a leader, he won't answer him. But the BBC man wants to speak to him. If I say, oh, how long do you want to speak for? And he's interested because he's a foreigner. So we must begin to recognize that our own institutions must work. When we say build strong institutions, don't build strong people, this is the time for doing that. Build strong institutions. You know?
All right, thank you very much. Rahim Adedoyin, let's have your take on the ethical challenges and therefore the work that needs to be done with regard to the practice of journalism, of good journalism, say in Nigeria and then across the borders.
I think it starts from the top. I disagree a little bit with Martins. We seem to be putting all the blame on the reporters, on the beat journalists. It starts from the editor himself. A lot of them have become consultants. If you are covering a beat and I see that you've been compromised, of course, there's a way to checkmate that. Editor should lead. You should provide inputs into what kind of reportage that you want. And if they don't do it, you sanction them. That is not happening. So if you are talking about ethical challenges, I think we need to start from the top. And then you mentor quite a number of them. I remember when we were at The Guardian, we have good reporters who could not write. We have good reporters who could write but could not report. But today some of them are editors, because what we did was to more or less mentor them and let them see the essence of good reporting and the essence of, because the greatest joy a journalist has in knowing that people are taking you serious outside. There's nothing like a newsroom, you know, newsroom experience. So what I'm saying, in fact, is that the ethical challenge we are having is two-dimensional. One, the editors as mentors. Are they doing their job? Then secondly, the journalists themselves. I'm sorry. If you're a journalist, the sweetest thing you look forward to as a reporter is seeing your byline the following day. It doesn't happen anymore. And that is very, very sad. It doesn't happen anymore. You know, it doesn't happen anymore. Because that is what actually gives you power. Whatever some of us have become today is because we practice journalism the way we thought it should be practiced. And it opens a lot of avenues for empowerment for whatever you want to become in life. So we need our people to understand the basics that when you practice good journalism, you also have a way of making yourself even marketable to people who will take you serious.
I'll come back to Prof. Let's talk about the IPI itself. What are the takeaways that we're looking forward to for Nigerian journalists, especially from Nigeria hosting this event?
Well, the component that has attracted me is the one that talks about a lot of training workshops for journalists, for practicing journalists, for students, and for all other people who will be part and parcel of it. So much of what is happening is not just opening ceremony, it's not just interaction, but exchange of ideas, exchange of professional ideas. That is going to take quite a lot of chance. Throughout the whole of Thursday, Friday, we're going to focus on the training of journalists, which is really what IPI is all about. Wow. As Rahim said at the very beginning, the purpose of World Congresses is to exchange ideas and bring the latest and let somebody here who has never recognized that he could take direction A. He now sees people who have taken direction A and who have made a lot of gains from direction A. When I say gains, I mean the professional one, not the one Kingsley is calling pocket line, you know. You know, the real gains.
Yeah, pocket line in lieu of byline.
Yeah. So not that. So we're talking about professional gains now. How to do it. The technology is changing. Many of our people have not seen certain facilities before. Now they begin to see. In those days, in our own days, analog reporters that we were at that time, if you write a report or you go to cover an event, you probably will not be able to take it back to your newsroom until the end of the day because you are coming from a long distance. All that is gone now because of technology. You can just send an email, you can send, in fact, you can drop your story from your spot and you can uplink from there. So all of those things are happening. And those who have not known it, these are opportunities for them to know things like that. So I think that the IPI Congress is very great for Nigeria. It's something that Nigeria should, and I'm happy that the government of Nigeria has taken it seriously. Even though it is not a government project, government has answered us in a very positive manner. The president himself is declaring the workshop open, and thereafter the ministers are going to talk to the journalists about what we are doing. So all that shows that there's acceptance. In fact, some of our colleagues have said that this is the first time they are seeing an IPI that really merges both the print and the electronic. In most other countries, it's just the print journalists who are really involved in IPI. But you can see now, I am a broadcaster and I'm chairman of publicity, and many other people who are in the electronic are part and parcel. In fact, the DG of NTA and even the executive director of news, they are all members of this. So really, I think that this has unified the media in Nigeria. All those dichotomies that we had with NUJ, NGE, Newspaper Proprietors Association, this is bringing everybody together.
I'm just wondering, Rahim Adedoye, what are the other potential takeaways from this Congress?
Yeah, well, I think the major takeaway is, for the first time, IPI has domesticated some of its programs. Like Professor Rede has said, they've zeroed in on the major issues in Nigeria right away. The first one, of course, is safety of journalists. You have terrorism rampaging all over the place. It used to be Boko Haram. Now it is Icemen. I think our people need to be trained. How do they cover this without getting themselves in trouble? Secondly, election 2019. We're also focusing on that. And they are giving the journalists, not only high-neck journalists, even political reporters, some kind of training on how they can cover this effectively when the time comes. But more importantly, they have also domesticated the program for African audience. What do I mean by this? We have an African town hall where you'll be discussing issues that affect Africa. For instance, Africa is going through a lot of transition now. Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, Zimbabwe, these are some of the issues that we are going to be discussing at the African town hall. And of course, you have the normal technical sessions where we're going to be talking more deeply about things that affect the practice of journalism in individual countries.
Professor Pate, some of this, as congresses and conferences, are practical areas that students can learn hands-on, some of the things that they're learning in school. Should they be part of this?
Well, I don't know. We have not been invited by the IPI. I don't know if some other professors, at least I have not heard from any professor that told me has been invited. Perhaps we are not registered members. That's why. But we believe, personally, I'm subscribing to the newsletter from IPI headquarters. Even yesterday, I received their newsletter. So I've followed, and I take a lot from what they give to our students because it sort of connects the industry and the academia. And you see, these days, journalism in Nigeria must address the issue of technological innovations. It is a reality you have to mainstream into what we do. We have to address the issue of safety for journalists, and we have been doing that. I've written extensively on that, delivered papers all over the world, not just in Nigeria. It is a reality. We have to take care of it, journalism safety and impunity, as well as press freedom. Then the issue of financing and ethics. A lot of the ethical challenges we encounter is because of the weakness of the media institutions, as well as the inability of proprietors to properly finance their media organizations. Of course, naturally, the fallout will be clear. Then, like I've said in the beginning, the issue of contextual relevance. Our journalism must address the issue of development, must address the issue of democracy, must promote dialogue, must promote civic education. And then several other things will follow. But all of that will not happen except if you have professionally equipped journalists, like Martin said, who are conscious of what their responsibilities are in Nigeria in the context of the sections in the Constitution that talks about state policy and all of that. Then how do we also become critical? Good journalism must be critical journalism. It's not just about say so, he said, he described, he lamented, he explained. We have to pass that stage. But all of these things also require wider interventions. It's not just, you can't just be blaming journalism. What is the societal ethical orientation? When you talk of ethics, ethics is derived from our religions, from our cultures, from our social etiquettes. It's not as if it is something coming from somewhere. But then, to what extent do our politicians, for example, behave responsibly? In the Senate, you could see today people are going to jails, people that were governors. It shows you the level of ethical orientation that we are experiencing in society, and what is the take of the journalists in it. But this is, again, not to protect the journalists from this kind of behaviors.
All right, Professor Patrick, thanks a lot.
I don't think we should allow Professor Patrick to go without apologizing for his not getting our letter.
No, I was going to ask. I was going to ask if you don't you have invitees? Don't you have invitees from the academia for this Congress?
Of course, we did. Maybe Prof isn't aware, and that I think I apologize for that. But Professor Ralph Akifeleye is representing the communications experts constituency. We also wrote letters. We also wrote letters to head of departments of mass communication. As a matter of fact, I visited all of them in Abuja myself to deliver the letter to the head of mass communication.
Okay, there must have been some communication gap somewhere.
All right, so but we'll sort out. I'm sure that the IPI will sort all of that out. It's starting off tomorrow. But there's one issue that I would like us to still touch on, and this relates to the ethical perspective that's been foundational quite clearly. But have we sometimes considered the macroeconomic constraints on ethics? For instance, you talk about editors who are on the take either as consultants, which has been the bane of reporting and editing in the Fourth Republic, that's since 1999. When you look at the macroeconomic environment, rate of inflation, you look at the exchange rate, and of course you look at the fact that every journalist at the end of the day would need to have a pension, would need to have a roof over his head, and so on and so forth. These are workaday challenges that they face. And yet, there appears to be no relief anywhere, either from their employers or indeed, from other economic and financial institutions that ordinarily will provide them with support. When you say investigative journalism can be dangerous. What is the insurance cover? Martins?
Yes, definitely it's even very dangerous. Investigative, and then no insurance cover in most cases for people who just take this risk. Nobody will do risk analysis for you. You just go into it. But it's something that must be done. It's a professional hazard that we have to face. But the macroeconomic issue that you talked about, the cost of production. We encourage reporters and some middle-level managers now to be interested in what goes on in the house. Because sometimes you make unnecessary demand because you don't even know some aspect of management. Some of the costs of operations. And generally, the proprietors, some proprietors, you just go into this thing without counting the costs, without knowing the implications of investing in this. It's capital intensive. And these are issues that affect ethical, whatever, standards that we want to adhere to. If you are not paid, as I said earlier, who talks about ethics when you have a lot of demands to meet? Yeah. And this when your children that are going to school, even to put food on the table, inflation rate, you want to get something, and they are disturbing you to build a small house in your small village, and you are talking about ethics. Then you meet chief executive officers who are ready to meet your demand if you also meet their own demand. Then it becomes...
sorry to interject. In Asia, it was called ACDC, Attack and Collect, Defend and Collect.
Yes.
Collect. You studied that.
And then of course, when there was this joke about, people do not talk when they are eating. When it comes to when in our environment, they go to the newsroom to bring spokespersons. And that's another subject again for training. Because when you take spokespersons from the newsroom who have just journalism training, and they are going to do reputation management, there is a conflict of interest. In another environment, you go for training. You cross over from journalism to public relations. And that's another issue entirely. But that is for the classrooms to deal with. We do not have such classrooms yet here that can deal with that. But the important thing in this is how the economic status of journalists helps ethical standard. It is a very serious issue because some pay but don't pay well. Some who pay well don't pay regularly. And you put them on a beat like Abuja where you can get a small room for less than maybe 1 million. You are not paid your salary. How do you pay the rent? Not to talk of other issues. Obligations. Port Harcourt, Lagos, and other issues moving from place to place. Some people do not even pay the cost of getting journalists to move around. Go and cover events in Maiduguri. Go to the IDP camps like that. They say, go, don't worry. We will settle you when you come back. How does it go? So these are little things that matter. And these are little foxes that spoil journalism vines.
Well, Kingsley, I think the point you have raised is really serious. And I'm happy you raised it again so that more and more facts can be raised in that area. We've heard about those who are not well paid and those who are... Let us assume that people are paid regularly. Yes, what you call environment, what you look at in the environment. I'm a journalist and I decide to join NTA and a classmate of mine decides to go and contest election. He gets into the House of Reps or whatever. His newspaper allowance is bigger than my salary. I mean, and we are in the same community. We've seen each other. Now you see them laughing at me, say, oh, I'm collecting brown envelope. And they are collecting Ghana Must Go. No, so what, how do we progress from there? What is an envelope? An envelope is very small. But you know, the Ghana Must Go is a very big thing. But nobody is saying that these things should happen. But they happen. And so there's no need to be downplaying some and upplaying others and trying to pretend that oh, it's journalists who is very corrupt. Whenever
Professor Jega raised the issue not long ago. Yes. What happened? No, the matter just died.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a guest on Good Morning. We had a guest on Good Morning Nigeria, actually the spokesperson of the House of Reps. Yes. He responded to Professor Jega. I would like Rahim to come in here. When we're talking about it, I don't know. Maybe this is relevant. Perhaps in the way you're discussing macroeconomic environment, if there is stability in the macroeconomic environment, yes, perhaps things will work out that way. But once there are volcanic eruptions and therefore you have regular instability, one doesn't know what happens. When I was a foreign correspondent some 30 years ago, I recall nobody gave you a dime. And I didn't ask for a dime, and nobody gave you a dime to cover any assignment in Southern Africa. So, but it seems to be the regular fare elsewhere around the world, particularly in some places that we know of. Rahim.
You know, we are going to have an exciting miss at this Congress. For the first time, the publishers are going to come face to face with the editors. Not only have the publishers and editor registered as participants, we have a special session where some of the issues that Martins has raised about people not getting paid, some of these publishers will be on the hot seat and tell us why is this happening. The president of Nigerian Guild of Editors is also going to be there. The president of Nigerian Union of Journalists is also going to be there to represent their constituency. And we're also going to have the representative on the Newspaper Association of Nigeria. So that at the end of the day, maybe we'll come to some kind of solution as to what ethical issues we can address at the level of making practice at least good for practitioners in Nigeria.
Okay, thanks a lot. I just want to chill, just because after a while I will be winding down. I'm just wondering, gentlemen, in terms of good journalism, Dr. Iradia, Professor Iradia, Professor of Law or Professor of Journalism, I believe, because he has two caps. Well, mass communication. It mentioned it at the beginning, and I would like to start off with Professor Umaru Pate. in terms of good journalism doesn't just relate only to the municipal environment. It also relates across borders. How do the, shall we say, journalists in the advanced world perceive the least developed or the developing countries? This is an issue that I think Professor Pate was talking about, the New World Information and Communication Order, which was shut down under the auspices of UNESCO sometime in the early to mid-80s. So how does the IPR intend to tackle this? Because the news flow patterns remain the way they have always been.
It's even worse.
Yeah, so
we hear more about them. They hardly hear about us.
Yeah, well, and what they hear about us through the blinkers of negativity, and some would say, you know, racial profiling.
What they want to hear about us.
It's very simple to understand. The arguments went on for a long time. Eventually, with globalization and improvements in technology, it even died. Now, the issue is simple. They have invested in their media stations. They have their own ways of judging what is news. Now, if we want to counterpenetrate, to what extent can we do that? How much have we invested in our own facilities? How much have we invested in our own personnel? And how much are we willing to commit for us to give our own information out there? It's not cheap. When BBC, for example, decided to establish some stations, its offices in Nigeria, they have in Lagos, they have here broadcasting in Hausa, now they have added English, Pidgin, Igbo, and Yoruba. They know what they're doing. But right now in Nigeria, I'm just conducting a study right now on behalf of MacArthur Foundation on vernacular broadcasting in Nigeria. You may be surprised that we do not even broadcast in our local languages, where we do very, very minute. Yeah. And why is it so?
No,
because
NTA has a whole station for the languages.
Yeah, but it's,
stations.
Yes, it's one. And then NTA is elitist. We're talking of radio at the local level. Now, not only that, if you look at the balance between the cities and the villages, today most of our radio stations are on FM. They just broadcast in the cities. Go 100 kilometers into the villages, you don't get any signal. Look at FRCN. FRCN is supposed to have transmitters that will cover the entire nation. But hardly can you receive FRCN signals all over the country today. It means we need to invest more in our facilities so that we could also inform people out there. We also need to have magazines and other and even the social media. We need to be in control. When you talk of content, it is about control. When you hear people complaining, it is when they do not have ability to control. That is when they complain.
Professor Redia, I would like to have your thoughts on this, your closing thoughts on this, and of course the conference.
All right, thank you. Let me say first that we must also recognize the environment. I was talking about the environment in another perspective, but there's still a different perspective that we'd like to talk about. The African environment is different from the other environments. A journalist outside of Africa, for example, will be doing a fantastic investigative journalism report, and a lot of people will be clapping for him. In Nigeria, you will do an investigative report. When you get home, your family is lined up in front of your house, kneeling down to beg you that please don't kill us. Don't take us the way you are taking us now. You are not the only one that can reform this country, and so on and so forth. So family pressure is a major challenge to good journalism, because once you take a serious one, you see people are going to really talk about. Then development is a problem. Some 10 years ago, a senator came to the NTA here to see me as Director General. He said he wants to bring the world to an end. I said, what is the problem? So the television that was supposed to come to his community has not come. I said, Senator, do you have light there? Then that was the end of the story. So why are you looking for television in a place where there is no light? So the level of development is very, very important. And I'm thinking that we must begin to also accept that one of the problems in the developing nations is that they're always competing with the so-called developed nations. You cannot compete with somebody if you are not at par with him. We must seek to get there. We must get there gradually. We must get there with determination. We must be ready to get there and not just saying, oh, this is what they do in the US. This is what they do in the UK, and you want to do it here. The environments are not the same. So I think that some of those things need to be impressed upon our people to also recognize developmental phases of life so that people can really do what is right and get all they want.
We must say at this point a very big thank you to you, Professor Iridia. Thank you very much for being a part of our discussion this morning. I we wish you all the best in the Congress. And also...
Sorry, I was just wondering, Professor Iridia was talking about the senator that came to him, asking for a community station, and there was no light and so on and so forth. I mean, why didn't you ask him for a constituency project to set up inverters in the place? At that time, there was no constituency project.
Yes, which is very lucrative now. I will have grabbed that day.
All right, so all right, let's hand off
Professor Umar Pate, we also thank you for joining us. And we thank our colleagues too. Abdurrahim Adedoyin, thank you very much for joining us. Wish you all the best at the Congress as well. And Martin Zoloja, thank you very much for being a part of this robust discussion.
All right, let's go back to our complimentary segments now. We're taking sports. Africa has secured its first win at the ongoing FIFA World Cup.